Hey, what's going on? A couple of weeks ago, I made a video titled Stock Market Crash is Almost Here, or is it? A little attempt at clickbait. Didn't work that great. Wah, wah, wah. No, I just messing around. But in this video, I talked about the dreaded virus that's going around, the numbers of total cases and deaths and how it was increasing, as well as the status of the S&P 500 as well as the Dow Jones, and just kind of what was going on, how the numbers continued to increase cases, and the fear of the market crashing was at an all-time high because of its ridiculous recovery of the stock market, not necessarily the economy. So let's dive into that, see if we're in a different spot. I think we aren't necessarily. So if you haven't seen that video, feel free to go ahead and check it out. But you'll see here a big point of the video last week had to do with the COVID deaths and cases. So real quick, let's look at the actual stock and then we'll get into the case numbers. We finally did it. I mean, look at this number for the S&P 500. 33, guys. Top yesterday, a little bit higher, depending on when you're seeing this. It's been pulling back a little bit, but we'll see. I mean, before the virus, 33.86. We're almost back to all-time highs. It's pretty ridiculous. Now, it's been massively led by the tech companies. There has been a little bit of a pullback over the last few days in those areas, but the rest of the S&P 500 is starting to kind of pick up a little bit. You can see currently futures pretty stagnant, a little bit down right now. Again, this changes pretty frequently. I checked this about an hour ago, and they were up a lot more than this. But they're not really looking like much is happening, at least tomorrow. I know Thursday is generally a big day with the jobs report. But with it finally getting back now to these all-time highs, I made this video originally on July 20th. We were right here. So we've gained another 100 points almost since that video, and people are still saying the same thing. Now, another big part of the stock market that people are talking about is the PE ratio, which is the price to earnings ratio of the S&P 500 specifically. If you look at the chart here, I just literally Googled S&P 500 PE ratio. You're going to see that we are trading at a very high level. Typically, the mean 1581, median 1483. And again, this is the price to earnings ratio. Price to earnings ratio is one of the most widely used metrics for investors and analysts to determine stock valuation. In addition to showing whether a company's stock price is overvalued or undervalued, the PE ratio can reveal how a stock's valuation compares to its industry's group or benchmark like the S&P 500 index. If you didn't know what it was, that's a quick little overview. Going back here, you'll see that it's trading almost twice the average over its lifespan. Now, you can see this chart isn't interactive, so I did go to the table grid. And if you search by year or month here, you can see each month where it was trading at. We're continuing to rise. It's an estimate here. We'll get the accurate numbers. It looks like they do those quarterly. So they should be getting the last quarter soon. But you can see before COVID, that February date in February 1, we had a 26.42 confirmed. And we're only at a 2860.66. That to me is pretty interesting based on the earnings reports that we've only climbed that much. Now we fell as low in March as 2280, but it hasn't changed that much. So we talk about it going up so much recently. Now, obviously, it's continued to rise, right? We've been trading kind of in that 20s range for quite some time now. People have been saying it's overvalued, Over the last few years, people have been saying it's pretty overvalued. And it's not that much crazier than what it was right before we hit this mess. So that's just something to keep in mind. And also, it's really important to understand that if you just look at the first thing that pops up here when you just search what PE ratio, the increase, if you just Google that, basically says a higher PE ratio shows that investors are willing to pay a higher share price today because of growth expectations in the future. The high multiple indicates that investors expect higher growth from the company compared to the overall market. A high PE ratio does not necessarily mean a stock is overvalued. So in this case, a high PE ratio doesn't 100% mean it's overvalued. Now, people can look at this and they're going to say, yeah, it's overvalued based on the actual earnings, and that's true. But as it states here, a high PE ratio right now states high growth expectations for the future, which I think is fair to say. People expect there to be a lot of growth in this recovery. Now, you may disagree or agree, but that's just looking at the numbers. It's not that crazy PE ratio versus previous PE ratios. Now, I'm no expert. I'm not a financial advisor, but it's just something that I noticed when I started hearing about this. I looked into it. This is what I found. Please let me know if this makes sense to you. If you think I'm a complete doofus on this, let me know in the comments. But I feel like I'm just looking at the numbers. They don't look that crazy. And if you look at the actual people out there, some people really hurt by this, but there are other people that are not as hurt. And I'll tell you what, as you can see by these travel numbers, down a lot year over year, 31% equivalent to 2019 numbers, but we're hitting all-time highs for people traveling, 800,000 people since COVID started. So people want to travel. People want to go out and live their lives back to normal, a huge number of them. And that's why I think people are underestimating is the amount of people that are kind of fed up with all of this and want to just go. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong in this video. All I'm telling you is there are a lot of those people that want to go out and spend money. They want to go vacation. They want to go do stuff. And that's going to stimulate the economy a lot. So I think that the bounce back on some of these travel, that's why I've been bullish on Carnival. I made a couple of videos on them. I wanted to make a video on Delta right before it kind of picked back up over the last couple of weeks. I didn't do that, but I'm still bullish on those. Now, if we look back at this video I made, it looked like we were peaking at just under 1,000 deaths, and we were really, really ramping up on the cases for COVID all nationwide. See, going back here, July 20th, right? So that was that day that I made it. We continued to have some big numbers. It started to fall off the last week. Now, still crazy amounts of cases. There's been lots of weird things going out with the COVID cases. You can look that up yourself, but there's lots of conflicting information. Very strange. The deaths did continue to go up. Again, we made the video on July 20th, 390, and we hadn't had 1,000 death day. Well, that next day there was 1,000 death day, and it stayed in there, but now it looks, we'll see, but it does seem to be trending downward, and there was never a massive spike like you would expect these type of case numbers with deaths in this range. Okay, been a while since it started picking up here, so I think it's something to keep in mind. Now, there's a few theories going on around here. I'm no doctor, so I'm not going to try to pretend to be one, but the two that I hear is, well, it's a different strain now, it's kind of a second wave, or there's a few different areas of that. Or the other one is that might be a combination, I don't know, but the other one is that, well, back in these days there weren't as many tests. I know if you went in and got sick, like, they made sure you had symptoms, where now people have to get tested a lot more frequently, especially in certain areas. If you want to travel, you get there's all these new tests available, so people are getting tested way more people getting tests. I know personally several people who have been tested without symptoms who have had it. They never would have been tested back here. So in all reality, this rising case number may not really be rising that much. It may have risen a little bit, but I think it's skewed by the fact that fewer people were getting tested back then. That doesn't mean these aren't real cases necessarily, but it is something to keep in mind. So I believe people are still hopeful in the market recovering. Obviously, the market, it's a little bit risky right now if you're going to just invest in, because it seems to be overvalued. Okay, like if there are some serious setbacks, if things continue to shut down, it's going to go down. But I'm hopeful. I'm younger. I can afford to lose a little bit of my investment. I think it's going to continue to go up. I know that they've come out several times that they are not going to let the stock market fail. If it does fail, that's going to be really bad news. If it really does take another nosedive like it did at the beginning of this, it's going to be really bad news. And so I anticipate there probably to be a sell-off at some point, but not quite yet. And if things continue to open up, I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to run for a little bit. That's just my 2 cents. Again, I'm not an advisor, but hey, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like the video, make sure you like the video, subscribe if it's your first time here. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Peace.